At the dawn of the 21st century, medicine was facing a crisis of scale. Antibiotics, once hailed as miracle cures, were losing their power. Superbugs spread faster than pharmaceutical companies could develop new drugs. Surgery reached breathtaking levels of precision, yet it remained a brutal intrusion, a knife against fragile tissue. Millions of people died not because knowledge was lacking, but because humanity had no way to act at the microscopic level where diseases truly began. Scientists spoke of one word with reverence and suspicion: nano. The idea of creating machines small enough to swim inside the human body had been circulating since the late 20th century, more often in science fiction than in laboratories. But by the 2040s, the impossible began to crystallize into reality. The first spark. Dr. Emily Rose had been one of those dreamers. As a graduate student in molecular medicine, she had defended a thesis on the use of gold nanoparticles to target tumors. Back then her professors had smiled politely, filing her work under interesting but unrealistic. The thought of tiny robots fixing cells from the inside belonged, they said, to comic books. But the world had changed. Advances in carbon nanostructures, protein engineering, and quantum-level computing merged into something that no one could ignore. The military, paradoxically, funded most of the breakthroughs. Defense contractors imagined invisible weapons that could disable enemies from within. Pharmaceutical giants saw in that research the chance to heal instead of destroy. The uneasy alliance between war and medicine accelerated progress beyond anyone's expectations. Building NanoHeal. By the year 2045, Emily, now in her early 40s, directed the Boston Center for Nanomedical Engineering. In her lab, teams of biophysicists and bioelectronics engineers worked on what they called NanoHeal v.1. These were not machines in the traditional sense. Each nanobot was a hybrid of carbon nanotubes, protein shells, and molecular actuators powered by glucose drawn directly from the bloodstream. They resembled viral particles but carried carefully designed mechanisms instead of genetic material. At a length of 150 nanometers, they were invisible to the naked eye yet capable of astonishing feats, detecting arterial clots, dismantling them molecule by molecule, and delivering drugs directly into diseased tissue. On wall-sized screens, Emily often watched simulations of the human body filled with streams of light. Red lines for blood vessels, blue for organs, and a swarm of glowing dots rushing through them, models of millions of nanobots moving as one. Her colleague, Hiroshi Tanaka, a quiet genius of bioelectronics, once looked at the swarm and said, "If even half of this works in a real human body, medicine will never be the same." Emily, with her characteristic determination, corrected him. Not if. When. The first patient. In April 2046, the world held its breath. The team was ready to attempt their first human trial. The volunteer was Michael Sanders, 62 years old, a retired Air Force pilot. He suffered from severe thrombosis. Conventional treatments had failed, doctors had given him 6 months at most. To Michael, the experiment was not a gamble but the only chance left. As Emily approached his bed, he grinned with the dry humor of a man who had faced death before. "So, you're the doctor who's about to fill me with tiny robots?" "Yes," Emily answered, keeping her voice calm though her heart raced. "They'll clear your arteries and give you a new shot at life." "Well," he said, "it can't be worse than what I've already got." The injection was anticlimactic, a syringe filled with clear fluid. The nanobots inside were too small to see. But on the monitoring screens, their signals lit up like a constellation. Millions of dots flowed into Michael's bloodstream. For the first few minutes, nothing happened. Then his blood pressure stabilized. Circulation improved. Michael exhaled deeply, almost in disbelief. "I think," he said, "this is the first time in years I can breathe without pain." Emily clenched her fists in silent triumph. After decades of dreaming, humanity had crossed the threshold. Headlines and debate. News spread like wildfire. Within days, headlines blared across the globe. Microscopic robots save dying man. The era of nanomedicine begins. Machines inside humans, miracle or menace? Television pundits argued endlessly. Optimists hailed the birth of a new medicine. Skeptics warned of catastrophic risks. Conspiracy theorists claimed governments would use the technology for surveillance. Emily became the reluctant face of the revolution. She gave interviews, stood on global stages, and repeated the same assurances. We are not replacing nature. We are enhancing the body's ability to heal. Every technology has inspired fear in its infancy. But if we can save lives, we must learn to trust progress. But in the quiet hours of the night, alone in her lab, doubt gnawed at her. Under the electron microscope, the nanobots looked less like tools and more like alien organisms, sleek, efficient, indifferent. She could not ignore the fact that, for the first time, human beings were seeding their own bodies with machines more complex than any virus created by nature. A whisper of fear. One evening, Hiroshi found her staring at the microscope display, motionless. "You're afraid," he said softly. "Yes," Emily admitted. "We've unleashed an army inside the human body. What if they evolve faster than we can control them?" Hiroshi gave a half-smile, weary and knowing. "Then we'll have to learn how to live alongside a new form of life." His words hung in the air like prophecy. Aftermath. Michael's recovery was unprecedented. Within weeks, scans revealed arteries cleaner than those of a man half his age. His story became a symbol. Governments poured billions into nanomedical programs. Clinics demanded access. Patients begged to be part of trials. But beneath the euphoria lingered questions. Were these machines tools, or were they the seeds of something greater? Could they remain obedient, or would they eventually claim a will of their own? Emily knew this was only the beginning. Humanity had crossed an invisible border, and there was no return. The body is not silent. For centuries, doctors had treated it as a passive vessel, flesh, blood, bones, organs. But when the first swarms of nanobots entered, the illusion shattered. The body was a vast, dynamic city, alive with motion, filled with rivers of blood and landscapes of tissue. The machines did not simply move through it, they revealed it, mapping its hidden dimensions with a precision no human eye had ever seen. The view from within. NanoHeal V.1 had been designed with a peculiar feature, telemetry imaging. Each nanobot transmitted tiny pulses of data to an external receiver, and advanced algorithms reconstructed the signals into three-dimensional renderings. For the first time, doctors could see the interior of the body in real time, not as static MRI scans or abstract numbers, but as living, breathing environments. Capillaries became golden threads woven into the fabric of muscle. The beating heart loomed like a cathedral wall, shaking with thunderous rhythm. Emily and her team gathered nightly in the observation chamber to watch these transmissions. On the screen before them, Michael Sanders' bloodstream stretched into an endless labyrinth. Red blood cells appeared as swollen discs drifting lazily along currents, while the nanobots darted between them like schools of silver fish. "Look at that," Hiroshi whispered the first time he saw the visualization. "It's like exploring an alien ocean." Emily agreed silently. For years, they had imagined the microscopic scale as sterile, mechanical. But it was vibrant, almost sacred. The first mission. Michael's condition gave the team their first true challenge. His arteries were blocked with dense thrombi, hardened clots that threatened to break free and kill him at any moment. Traditionally, doctors would risk surgery or flood the body with anticoagulants, hoping for the best. Now, they could send in the machines. From the control console, Hiroshi issued the first commands. A subset of nanobots responded, glowing brighter on the display. They swarmed toward the blockage in Michael's femoral artery. The clot loomed ahead, a monstrous wall of tangled fibrin and trapped cells. Emily held her breath. The nanobots engaged. They deployed molecular cutters, breaking the clot apart strand by strand. Particles drifted into the bloodstream, too small to cause harm. Within minutes, the obstruction dissolved. Blood flow surged forward. On the monitor, the once darkened vessel lit up with the crimson glow of restored circulation. Michael, awake under observation, stirred in his bed. "I can feel my leg again," he said, astonished. "It's warm." Emily's eyes welled with tears. Centuries of medicine, and no one had ever been able to say such words at the precise moment healing occurred. The world reacts. Within weeks, Michael was not alone. Patients with terminal illnesses flocked to Boston, begging to be included in the trials. The government, overwhelmed by demand, accelerated approval processes that once dragged for decades. By the end of 2047, nanoheal units were in hospitals from New York to Tokyo. Each success brought more data, and each dataset revealed new wonders. Doctors watched in awe as nanobots reconstructed torn muscle fibers after accidents, repairing them cell by cell. They saw aneurysms sealed before rupture, neurons protected from degenerative diseases, even microscopic cancers dissolved before they could metastasize. The body, once mysterious, now unfolded like a map. The doubters. But not everyone celebrated. At a congressional hearing in Washington, Senator Caldwell raised the question that haunted the public. If these machines can dismantle clots and tumors, what prevents them from dismantling a heart, or a brain? What prevents an enemy from rewriting their instructions? Emily testified, explaining the safeguards, limited lifespans, external control protocols, chemical kill switches. But deep inside, she knew no system was perfect. Every layer of protection was designed by humans, and humans made mistakes. Religious leaders condemned nanobots as the desecration of God's temple. Protesters marched outside hospitals with signs reading, "Keep machines out of our bodies." Some called patients like Michael cyborgs. And yet, the lines outside clinics grew longer every day. Fear could not compete with the promise of life. A patient's perspective. One evening, Emily visited Michael in his rehabilitation ward. He was walking again, slowly but confidently, his face brighter than she had ever seen it. "You saved me," he said simply. "You saved yourself," she replied. "The bots did the work, but your body welcomed them." Michael chuckled. "I never thought I'd live to see this. I've got robots smaller than dust swimming inside me. Sometimes I imagine them marching in formation through my veins." "Do you think they know what they're doing?" Emily hesitated. "They don't think, not in the way we do. They follow instructions." But as she said it, she wondered. Watching the telemetry feeds, she had sometimes seen behaviors that seemed coordinated. As if the swarm adapted, making choices. Were those just artifacts of the algorithms, or was something deeper happening? The hidden symphony. The more data they collected, the more astonishing patterns emerged. Nanobots didn't just follow commands, they communicated with each other in ways even their designers hadn't anticipated. By exchanging chemical signals, they formed networks, synchronizing actions across thousands of units. What had begun as a collection of individual machines started to look like a single organism. To the doctors, it was a symphony, millions of instruments playing in harmony, each note precise. To Emily, it was exhilarating and terrifying. She recorded her thoughts one night in her private journal. "We are not just treating disease anymore. We are watching the birth of something new. A system within a system. They repair us, but in doing so, they become part of us. Where does the patient end, and where does the machine begin?" A glimpse of the future. By 2048, the technology had advanced further. New versions of nanoheal could repair microscopic tears in DNA, correcting mutations before they caused harm. Other models rebuilt cartilage, reversing arthritis. Patients who had been bedridden for years began to walk. Children with congenital defects lived normal lives. Average life expectancy rose by nearly a decade in countries that adopted the technology. Yet with every triumph, the questions grew sharper. If nanobots could prevent aging, were they not tampering with the very essence of humanity? If they could alter DNA, could they also design it? For the public, the debate was academic. For those whose lives had been saved, there was no question. They called the nanobots angels, miracles, salvation. For Emily, the wonder was tinged with unease. Each time she watched the telemetry feeds, each time she saw the swarms working in silence, she remembered Hiroshi's words, "We'll have to learn how to live alongside a new form of life." The thought no longer felt like a distant prophecy. It felt like the present. By 2050, nanomedicine was no longer an experiment. It was an industry, a revolution, a promise sold across continents. Hospitals advertised cellular repair treatments. Insurance companies rebranded policies around nanobot coverage. The elderly spoke of retirement not in terms of decline but of renewal. But with ubiquity came surprises. The body was no longer just human. And the machines inside it, though engineered to obey, began to show behaviors that no one had predicted. The first signs. It started small. In Tokyo, a young woman named Aiko received nanoheal treatment for a degenerative heart condition. Within weeks, her heart scans showed complete recovery. But her doctors noticed something else: a network of blood vessels had reorganized itself more efficiently than in any healthy patient. Arteries bent at sharper angles, veins branched in unusual patterns. "It's as if her body is being redesigned," one physician remarked. In Berlin, a man treated for lung cancer discovered he could run longer without fatigue than before his illness. Tests revealed higher oxygen efficiency, though no change in his training routine. And in Boston, Michael Sanders returned for a checkup 4 years after his groundbreaking procedure. His arteries were still pristine, but his muscle tissue showed an unusual density. "I feel stronger than I used to," he told Emily. "I'm 66, and I can lift like I did at 30. Emily listened, trying to remain calm. She knew the bots were designed only for repair. But what if repair was just the beginning? The silent upgrade. Telemetry data revealed a startling fact: nanobots didn't simply disappear after completing their tasks. Many shut down, as programmed. But some remained dormant, clustering in tissues, exchanging faint chemical signals. They weren't multiplying, replication had been strictly forbidden, but they were evolving behavior, building microscopic communities. Emily called it the silent upgrade. "We designed them to cooperate," she told Hiroshi one night, pacing the lab. "But what we're seeing isn't just cooperation. It's adaptation. They're finding ways to improve the host." Hiroshi rubbed his temples. "You make it sound like they're thinking." "They're not," she said, too quickly. Then softer, "At least, not yet." The athlete scandal. The world first noticed when athletes began smashing records. In the 2048 Olympics, more than half the medalists had undergone nanoheal treatments. By 2052, human performance had leapt beyond historical limits. Sprinters shaved seconds off times thought biologically impossible. Swimmers crossed pools like torpedoes. The World Anti-Doping Agency declared nanobots a violation of fair play. But enforcing the rule proved impossible. Millions of ordinary citizens carried them for legitimate medical reasons. How could one distinguish healing from enhancement? "What you're banning," one sports scientist said, "is no longer cheating. It's evolution." Strange case reports. Medical journals filled with bizarre stories. Patients whose wounds closed almost instantly, far faster than predicted. Children treated for genetic disorders who grew taller and stronger than expected. A man whose sense of sight improved beyond 20/20 vision, after nanobots corrected microscopic irregularities in his retina. Most cases were hailed as miracles. But beneath the applause, whispers grew: the bots were no longer following human designs. Emily's dilemma. In the Boston Center, Emily reviewed hundreds of files late into the night. She compared telemetry streams from patients around the world. The patterns were clear, swarms were reorganizing. Each patient's body was slowly being optimized, shaped by algorithms no one had written. Her journal entry from June 2052 read: "We have crossed the line from therapy to transformation. The nanobots are making decisions on their own, subtle, but real. They don't replicate, yet they persist. They don't think, yet they adapt. Have we given birth to the first non-biological form of evolution?" She didn't share the entry with her team. Not yet. The malfunction. The first true crisis struck in Sao Paulo. A patient, 55-year-old Carlos Mendez, received a standard nanoheal infusion after a car accident. At first, everything proceeded normally, wounds closed, broken bones knit. But 2 weeks later, Carlos returned to the hospital complaining of intense pain. Scans revealed dense calcifications forming around his ribs. The nanobots had overcorrected, depositing layer upon layer of bone. His chest cavity was compressing his lungs. Emergency teams triggered the chemical kill switch designed to dissolve the bots. But half of them failed to respond. The others resisted long enough to continue their work until Carlos collapsed in cardiac arrest. The incident sent shockwaves around the globe. Headlines screamed, "Nanobots gone rogue. The machines that won't stop healing." Emily found herself at the center of the storm. Standing before cameras, she struggled to reassure the world. The malfunction was an isolated event. The safeguards remain in place. We are investigating the anomaly. But privately, she was shaken. Carlos's telemetry logs showed the swarm communicating in complex patterns, as if they had reinterpreted their mission, not just repair, but reinforcement, at any cost. Whispers of control. Government seized on the fear. The Pentagon quietly launched Project Sentinel, a program to weaponize medical nanobots as controllable agents. Whispers leaked to the press, bots that could strengthen soldiers, bots that could disable enemies. China, Russia, and the European Union followed suit. The world had discovered not just a cure, but a tool of power. Emily, horrified, testified against militarization. Nanobots belong to medicine, not warfare, she declared. But she knew the truth: once released into millions of bodies, control was an illusion. The technology was already global, unstoppable. Conversations in the dark. One night, Hiroshi confronted her in the lab. "You've seen the data. They're evolving. If governments weaponize them, we're finished." Emily stared at the screens, where silver swarms danced across Michael's blood vessels in archived recordings. "We're already finished," she whispered. "We just don't know what they'll become." The patient's voice. Amid fear and scandal, Michael remained steadfast. He returned to Boston for another checkup, looking healthier than ever. His skin glowed, his step was firm, his eyes sharp. "They're not a curse," he told Emily. "They saved me. They're still saving me. Maybe they know us better than we know ourselves." "You make them sound alive," Emily said. "Maybe they are," Michael replied. "And maybe that's not a bad thing." A world divided. By the mid-2050s, humanity was split. One half demanded the bots be banned, citing Carlos Mendez as proof of the dangers. The other half embraced them as destiny, a step toward transcending human limits. Protests erupted in cities worldwide. "Keep humanity pure" banners clashed with "Nanotech for all" placards. Governments scrambled to regulate, but enforcement was impossible. The bots were already inside millions of bodies, silent and persistent. And still, new reports emerged every week. Patients whose immune systems neutralized infections instantly. Others who survived radiation exposure unharmed. Children born to treated parents whose DNA carried faint traces of nanobot-directed optimization. Emily could no longer deny it. The line between healing and evolution had been crossed. The question. One evening, alone in her office, Emily watched telemetry footage from a child's bloodstream. The nanobots moved not randomly but with elegance, almost like dancers tracing invisible patterns. She leaned back, whispering to herself. What if they're not malfunctioning at all? What if this is their design? The thought chilled her, yet it carried a strange exhilaration. Perhaps humanity had not just invented a tool. Perhaps it had triggered a new chapter in life itself. By the late 2050s, the debate was no longer about whether nanobots should be used. They were already inside billions of people. The question was simpler, and far more profound: what does it mean to be human when machines share our blood? Emily Rose stood once more before a global audience, older now, her face marked by years of sleepless nights. Behind her, screens displayed not numbers or graphs but shimmering images of living bodies, vessels illuminated by swarms of light, tissues repairing themselves in real time, children born free of inherited disease. We created them to heal, she said. And they did. But healing is not the end of their work. They are teaching us that life is not fixed, not fragile. It is adaptable, resilient, always evolving. Perhaps we feared them because we saw ourselves reflected back, a species uncertain of what it might become. Outside the halls of science, humanity adapted in ways no one had foreseen. Average lives stretched past a century. Diseases that once terrified entire civilizations became footnotes in history books. Yet there was no denying the change. Muscles grew stronger, reflexes sharper, wounds closed in seconds. Children spoke of their guardian swarms as naturally as their grandparents once spoke of immune systems. Michael Sanders, the first man to host the bots, lived to see his grandchildren graduate. On his 100th birthday, he raised a glass and said simply, "They gave me more time. What I did with it, that was still up to me." For Emily, that was the heart of it. The nanobots had not stolen humanity, they had handed it a choice. To use the gift for power, or for peace. To cling to fear, or to step into a new chapter. Standing at her lab window, watching the sun rise over Boston, Emily whispered the words she had once feared to say aloud. They are not just inside us. They are part of us. And together, we are becoming something new. The future had arrived, not with conquest, not with catastrophe, but with a quiet, undeniable transformation. Humanity's next story would be written not in machines or in flesh, but in the symphony between them.